Hey, welcome to the podcast, which right now only features myself, Dr. Luke, and the lovely producer Jordan. I believe Osik will be joining us in a few minutes, hopefully. And because we had some leftover St. Patrick's Day's decorations, here we are again, all decked out accordingly. And this is part 2 of our celebration of that day. We're going to be looking at the ritual of Osiris, which is chapter 39, and we're going to confine our inspection to section 1, the popular rites. And if you're new to this broadcast and what we do here, we try to look at the correspondences identified in the Golden Bough with the archetypal psychohistory of the 20th and 21st century. It's part of a book project that I am working on. So if any of the subjects that appear here on the title card, which are but a tease of what is to follow, I hope you stick around. And before I launch into that, Jordan, welcome.
Thank you. Yes, the green is very appropriate as we get into the details of Osiris. I did not have a green apron, so the St. Patty's Day attire will have to do.
I looked at myself in the mirror. I was like, I look more like Fred Flintstone than anything else. Like
you do. You do. It's the tank top.
I don't know how long this hat will last. We'll see. It's actually a Mardi Gras hat. It's all right. So some of the things we're going to be talking about today. We're going to start off looking at the ghost of Robert E. Lee and how he figures into a potential eternal struggle between JFK and Lee Harvey Oswald. We are going to continue to look at some of the Osirian imagery and the Isis imagery that we did not cover last time when we looked at chapter 38, specifically the nautical themes attached to JFK, and also the image of Isis as it is attached to Jackie. Also, I would like to spend a fair amount of time looking at the unusual involvement. I don't have some sort of statistical chart to map all this out, but it seems to me that there's something very interesting about JFK's involvement with dam building projects in the run-up to the assassination, given that Osiris is so intimately connected to the River Nile as the life-sustaining force, or perhaps even a personification of it, and what that may mean, not only for the projects that he was doing in California and Texas, but for the Trinity River itself. And I would like to get into some more theoretical things. Last time, I introduced some of the thinking of Nick Land to potentially explain away, or not explain away, but to potentially grasp with some of these cycles of history that we're looking at, and how there seems to be something like a controlled demolition after this cycle of fall, sacrifice, and ascent that we've been talking about through Trinity and the Apollo space missions, and what that may have to shed on these cycles. I want to bring it into conversation with someone who I suppose I've heard about before, but I think is going to be relevant, especially when we talk about the phenomenon of synchronicity that is replete throughout all these studies, is a man named John C. Lilly, which you can see here in the bottom right-hand corner. I believe the other individuals on this couch that he's with are Timothy Leary and Allen Ginsberg. And his thought, especially when it comes to the concept of ECHO, the Earth Coincidence Control Office, and what that may mean for some of the personal synchronicities that I share here via the Gilmore Girls, but also through the ones that we see in history. And lastly, I want to talk about, I'd like to revisit the Rice Moon speech that JFK gave to inaugurate the Apollo missions. Long ago, we talked about it in regards to the alchemical marriage. And of course, you throw rice at a wedding. And that seemed pretty obvious. But as we get deeper into the vegetative dying and rising gods, I want to think about the significance of JFK attaching himself and the moon missions to a university that, and I'm sure the name Rice is like, I'd have to go look this up, but I think it's probably named after a person. Jordan, you might want to Google that for me if you don't mind. But the fact that it's associated with a crop is quite interesting to me. So these are going to be some of the subjects that we're going to look at today. Do you by chance know how Rice University got its name? I know its mascot is the owl, which is also very intriguing from a mythological perspective. the owl, I suppose, from my understanding, I mean, his name is Sammy the Owl. There's this whole story about the mascot being abducted, but the owl itself, I believe, is a reference back to the owl of Athena, and of course, that is connected to knowledge and wisdom. So it would make sense that an owl would be connected to a university of higher learning.
Yeah, I've had a lot of owl synchronicities this week, by the way.
Yeah.
It's named after William Marsh Rice. He is an American businessman and entrepreneur who made his fortune in Texas. He is best known for leaving his fortune to establish Rice University. He was murdered by his valet, Charles F. Jones, as part of a conspiracy orchestrated by Albert T. Patrick. And the supposed goal of the conspiracy was to forge Rice's will and claim his fortune. Patrick was sentenced to death for his role in the plot, which is not something you see today often. Yeah, a lot there. He was born in Springfield.
I had no idea. Yeah.
Springfield. That's an interesting name to me.
It's interesting. His name's Marsh as well. We've looked at the especially when we're looking at Addis and the connection between JFK and Keynes and Reeds, and the fact that Marsh would be involved with this as well is very interesting. If you don't know what we're talking about, this is I guess in some circles an occult practice of onomancy, which really, I mean, it's biblical if you're interested in that. It's replete in the Bible as well. Just think about the name of Jacob and Israel and the importance of changing the name. So without further ado, we have so much to cover, Jordan. And I'm sorry if you have something to say. I didn't mean to cut you off, but we probably should just jump right into it.
I would just say the whole vegetation fractal with William Marsh Rice is deep. Yeah. I'm already seeing like 5 different things worth mentioning that really tie him into agriculture, harvest, the names of his birthplace in Springfield, his middle name. It goes on and on and on, as well as some of the ways he made his money. So
that's fascinating. I don't know why I didn't think to look that up, but this is like, we looked at the Rice University speech like months ago, and I thought we had kind of solved it. And this was kind of a late addition to this presentation.
And he passed in a killing of the king situation. He was murdered so that
an inheritance could pass. Yes.
His wealth would be redistributed to a new king.
That's interesting. That's interesting. Cool. All right. I hustle us along because I was up at 6 this morning and I added 2 additional slides because I realized that there was a bit of a conflation, not necessarily by me, but in the general public about what the obelisk means. And I had to untangle that confusion, and that led to this whole other rabbit trail. So I'm anticipating 2 new slides, which puts us close to 20. So we got to get to it. Okay, this first one, I alluded to the ghost of Robert E. Lee. So I've been plugging this book that I got at the thrift store the other day. It's The Torch Is Passed by the Associated Press. It's a retrospective of the last moments of JFK and the funeral. And it reads like a denser magazine. It's fantastic. And what I learned in the process of reading that is that Lee Harvey Oswald's father was named Robert Edward Lee Oswald. And on a lark, I looked into it, and wouldn't you know, they are related. Robert E. Lee is an ancestor of Lee Harvey Oswald. Now that's really crazy. Not only that, Lee Harvey Oswald, I believe, is like I think he might be a third cousin of Roosevelt. So Lee Harvey Oswald, and perhaps everybody, I'm not some expert genealogist. If everybody was to sit down and do their genealogy, perhaps we could all find these connections. I don't know. And because there's so much interest in Lee Harvey Oswald, people dug this stuff up. I'm not sure how much conscious acknowledgement he knew about his place in American history, but he had a lot of it. And what's interesting to me about this is thinking about this in the context of JFK being the spiritual successor of Abraham Lincoln. I think everybody, at least in the 90s, perhaps, who went through the public educational system, there was always like a little infographic like, did you know that there are all these like uncanny synchronicities between Lincoln and JFK? That's probably been struck from the record because it now is probably seen as inducing schizophrenia in people. But We, even in our study, we've picked up on so many more parallels I don't think people ever anticipated. And what I find interesting about this is that really the main antagonist of Lincoln during the Civil War was Robert E. Lee, right? Maybe you could say Jefferson Davis, but really, I mean, Lincoln was waging war against the general of the Confederacy, who he asked, right, to be the general of the Union forces, and he sided with his state of Virginia in the South. And that's intriguing that the namesake or the descendant of Robert E. Lee is going to be the one who, in a way, kind of like takes the revenge and takes out the presidential figure later on, 100 years later. Not to mention, right, that the opposer, that who is oppositional to Robert E. Lee, was Ulysses S. Grant, right? He was the leader of the Union forces. And through a variety of different trails, we have picked up on there being something Ulyssian about JFK, right? The poems he likes, the sort of the foreshadowing of him via Marilyn Monroe and the reading of the Joyce text, etc. There's too many for me to recall or list right at this moment. Go back and check out the catalog. But I thought this was profoundly interesting that kind of the same sets of individuals are reappearing. The names are kind of locked in struggle. I don't have a lot more to say about this than that. I do have another infographic in the next slide that we can get to. I'm going to give Jordan a chance to respond to this. But what's so interesting about this, if I can just, this is one of the hardest images that I've had Google Gemini create for me. Now knowing that Lee Harvey Oswald is part of the American historical tree, and I don't know if this is a stretch. I don't know if this is silly. It makes this whole killing of the king ritual, which people so often say is going on with the Kennedy assassination. I'm still figuring out what I think about this. I've put forward a theory of theophonic structuralism, where I think there are these natural cycles that repeat. It's not necessarily a conspiracy that's doing this. But if in the killing of the king story, we have someone who's, kind of an outsider, perhaps connected to that line, who is deposing the king. And I mean, Oswald was definitely an outsider. I'm listening to Norman Mailer's Oswald's Tale right now, and the backstory, his time in Russia, et cetera, et cetera. But it almost is like he has broken, he's part of that genealogical tree, and he's either the Bough himself that has been broken or is breaking it himself to challenge the ruling king. And I don't know how much of this is like true archetypal eruption, how much of this is poetic license, but just, I think this is kind of a work of art that the AI has turned out for me. So I'm going to pause there and let Jordan weigh in on what I've just said.
It's very interesting to think about. I have to shoehorn in here our little field trip to the National Cathedral, and something that stood out to me was in, I think, 2023, they removed the stained glass that commemorated Robert E. Lee, and they replaced it with stained glass all about the civil rights movement, and it says "No foul play" all over it. I think there's a lot there to unpack, and our friend Heidi Love might have something to say about that, or even Jesse Zeviter. Too much to get into here, but I think it's another data point that kind of shows the ongoing killing of the king figure that has happened with Robert E. Lee. I know people have different feelings about it, but we've seen the toppling of statues, the toppling of this archetype in the past decade in a very fascinating way that goes beyond the simple death of the man. And then you're talking too about generationally, these people kind of playing out these cycles. But I don't know. It's interesting that it's happening a bit in parallel with the Trump administration, which in and of itself is sort of either this rekindling of the Kennedy cycle or a subsuming of the Kennedy cycle.
Yeah, we've talked about that a lot. There was something else that happened this week. I didn't think to make a whole slide about it. But what Jordan's referencing is a number of the monuments and legacy features of the Kennedy administration are being, I don't want to say hijacked, but co-opted or perhaps erased altogether by Trump. And people have lots of feelings about this, right? Because JFK is this American/liberal saint, that specifically talking about the Kennedy Center, the Rose Garden, the colors on the on Air Force One potentially being painted over. This past week, really the past 2 weeks, it's been a lot of talk of Trump just taking over Cuba one way or the other, right? And this is forefront on my mind because I'm like deep in this research and know that was like a big part of what set up this whole killing of the king ritual. Is many people speculate from a conspiracy perspective that whatever group of conspirator they want to posit, that was partially retribution for the failed Bay of Pigs invasion.
Mm-hmm.
So in a way, it's like if Trump were to like, do a regime change or acquire Cuba or something like that, again, it kind of like rewrites a chapter out of the JFK history.
Yeah, the Cuba nexus point is a very interesting one that's playing out right now. It's a great point.
Yeah. And we've talked about Cuba and it's interesting too. Like, yeah, speaking of these, like, I don't want to get too far down this rabbit hole, but we've talked about Cuba in a lot of different ways as it relates to Addis and Adonis, but the whole Bay of Pigs thing, even the Christic imagery, the association of pigs with these dying and rising gods is very interesting. Either being slayed by pigs or cut down by pigs or plagued by pigs in some way.
Yeah.
Okay. By the way, Osik is going to join us in a few minutes. He's just running late. So what do we have next? Okay. So last time, Jordan has been very awesome to do a lot of the narration and set up a lot of these slides. But I have these summaries oftentimes leave out important details that potentially, I found just like you really have to comb through this material because you never know what's going to like crack open a major insight. Something that I thought that we potentially left off last time, and I haven't found a correlate, but I'm just going to put what I've done here is I really created the whole timeline about the conspiracy against Osiris and when it happened and chronologically so that we can understand it. Something I didn't include here was the cutting of Isis's hair. I tried to look in to see if like anything connected to Jackie on that. We haven't talked about the Biblis episode in depth. This is when Osiris is in the chest and like the tree grows around it. I went a little further into the text. I have a feeling that's going to become important later. It's also going to help us disentangle this distinction between obelisk and Djed pillars, which I didn't know a lot about until like 7:30 this morning. So I want to issue a little bit of a clarifying note on that. And so if we can go further, Jordan, if you can progress the slides here. I did not talk. I don't think I talked about the crocodiles not harming Isis last time. So that's something to think about. And maybe go a little bit further. These are all here if you just want to screenshot them for your own notes, and I'll get back to it at some point. And then this is Osiris in the underworld. I mean, there's going to be the whole like weighing of the heart in the underworld. I mean, the thing that I've got a slide on this at some point that I'll try to address. I mean, that seems very familiar to me in terms of I don't know if you remember, Jordan, the falcon feather drop that they did on the moon, right? That seems very similar to this, right? I'm trying to remember the name of the astronaut that did it off the top of my head. It might have been Edgar Mitchell, but I got to go deeper into it. But it's very Egyptian and Osirian, and I've got to think about what all that means. And there's like, I've got some other slides for the future. There are all these Egyptian spots on the moon. I believe there's an Osiris and an Isis crater that might be potentially connected to Apollo 17. I have to check my notes to be sure. But we've talked about the rockets themselves being kind of an extension of the solar obelisk. So we are going to have to go deeper into that at some point, but we have so much still to cover. So we can kind of breeze through these and go to the next one, unless you want to say something about something that we left off last time.
No, I think we can keep going.
There was a little something about Isis involvement with like fire. And of course, like, the eternal flame came to mind. So I may revisit that as well.
Sure.
This
and
right
we
here,
kind of drove by, I mentioned last time, baptism by fire and baptism by water. That's a big deal.
Yeah. Real quick, this is an update from a slide from last presentation. This is the Interpretatio Graeca. We alluded to the pantheon of Greek gods being translatable into the Egyptian pantheon. Of course, how they're all related to one another is a little bit up for debate, but I've gone through here and updated the chart. So it's not a perfect transaction, not a perfect translation. It's not because like, for instance, we have Ra being associated with Zeus, but, in the Greek pantheon, um, uh, Zeus is the son of Kronos, but here we have Geb being the Greek version of Kronos. So obviously it's not going to be perfect, but just to go through it, my understanding, and I'm like, it's like that joke from The Simpsons where Marge is like, oh, I think she said this. She's like, I'm giving piano lessons. You just have to be like a week ahead of the kid that you're teaching. That's kind of me in this process. I hope everybody knows I'm not an expert in this stuff. I'm learning as we go here. So my understanding, and I could be wrong, is that Ra is Zeus. Thoth we've talked about as being Hermes. Hathor as Aphrodite. Shu could be Atlas or Aeolus. Tefnut could be Artemis or Aphrodite, which is kind of a problem because we have Hathor as Aphrodite already, right? Gab, I mentioned earlier as Kronos. Nut as Rhea. I think we talked about this last time. Isis could be seen as Demeter or Hera. Osiris as Hades or Dionysus. It didn't make sense if it's Hades because Osiris, becomes the king of the underworld at some point. Nephthys, I understand that to be Persephone. Set is either Typhon or Ares. Horus, we talked about this last time as being Apollo as the child, but Harpocrates as the elder. Or do I have that reversed? I might have that reversed. I'm sorry. I might have that reversed. I think it's the other way around. Remind me to make a note of that because Harpocrates is does the sign of the child, like the silent sign is just to represent a child, like playing a joke and being mischievous. So I might have to update that in real time. I'll let Ostic talk here in a moment and I'll update it. And then we had Anubis as Hermes or Hades. And I want to welcome Ostic to the chat. Hey, Ostic. Can we get some audio for Ostic? I don't think he can hear us, or he's working on his audio still. Ostic, welcome. Let's hear your voice, my man.
Yeah, sorry. I had some audio problems just for a second.
What have you been up to?
I went to see a movie. I thought I'd be back, but then they had a long interval.
What'd you see?
That's an Indian movie, Dhurandhar 2.
Oh.
Any archetypal themes in it?
It's basically it's I don't know what it's just an action movie. It's about doing secret operations in Pakistan, like Indian like CIA shit. They're doing. They're infiltrating criminal gangs there and then killing them off, and then pretending to be gangsters, but they're actually Indians. That's like a fan theory of it. It's like okay. I mean, you have to see it.
No, that's great. That's great. I needed you to buy me some time. Jordan, I don't know if you can refresh that slide. Just so I had them switched. It's not that important. Yeah, there we go. There we go. I'm not perfect. Okay. So why don't we, Jordan, I don't know if you want to say anything else about the translation of this, of the Egyptian deities into the Greek deities. I mean, the only other thing I'll say about this is like, well, why were the Greeks so interested in this? I mean, as they were kind of running their empire, I think the idea was ultimately to find a way to assimilate the Egyptian culture into their own. Not to mention there might have been like priestly class that wanted to do some sort of syncretized wisdom acquirement. But I mean, ultimately is kind of the effort to pluralize and make their society a more multicultural, cohesive thing.
Yeah. Well, right now I'm very obsessed with why are the Americans obsessed with this? Because it's everywhere.
Well, elaborate on that. I think I know what you're saying, but maybe for people who don't understand your interests of late.
Well, a lot of the architecture and monuments around Washington, D.C., some people even do tours led by Egyptologists.
Yeah, you've been looking into this.
Yes, I would like to know more. So if anyone has any tips, let me know. I'm reading that book about the sacred geometry of DC, but yeah, I guess right now I'm just kind of exploring the symbolism that is there, but I think even more so I'm curious about why they're so obsessed with it, which I'm not sure I'm going to find the answer to that in an obvious place, but
I have
it's,
not I've not dug deep into it. I mean, look, I think the exoteric reason for this is like, is to DC is supposed to be kind of this mixture of great civilizations of the past and like situating itself within that conversation. That's why you have all the Greco-Roman architecture. And so it would make sense to have the Egyptian one as well. This is what they would tell like a non-schizoid person. The more schizoid individual would see it as, obviously connected to the secret societies, which is really not hidden at all when you understand that they have been involved in the erecting of these monuments, whether it's in the Cleopatra's Needle in New York or with the Washington Monument in DC. Yeah. My understanding of it, and I've not gone deep into it, is that it has something to do with Haram Abiff. So, but I'm not some expert on this. So that would be potentially a place for individuals to look.
I mean, my hypothesis is they're doing magic and
okay.
But
maybe,
that's not something I'm
yeah, maybe
finding a lot of official tours about.
What's that?
Okay. You talked about Mithra. She was carrying a torch. Yes. I thought like maybe Statue of Liberty it's a he.
Well, Mithra is a he. That's my understanding.
Oh.
But it is interesting.
Is it Columbia that is the who's the
goddess of America is Columbia. The Statue of Liberty, there is a complicated.
Well, it's Liberty.
Right. And
she has a torch.
Right. And that is a whole complicated thing. Perhaps we'll get into it at some point. But, obviously, I mean, it's not like it just came out of the ground, right? I mean, I think both of you know that it was a gift from France. Okay. I think the guy who made it was the same guy who made the Eiffel Tower, but I have to check my notes. But it originally wasn't destined for. Is it the same guy?
I think something was written about like this has been a gift to America from the Freemasonic Society in France or something.
Maybe. I'd have to look it up.
I read it somewhere. I saw like there may be a plaque
there may be. I've not seen it. But I'm not saying you're wrong. I just haven't seen it. But
also about just one thing, like I saw that there's cities in America that are named after different cities elsewhere. That's very funny to me. So it's like you have named a city called Philadelphia. That's a city in Egypt, and it's like it goes on and on with European cities. So it's like I don't know. It feels like something that has a sort of a transplantation element to it. It's like they have erected these things. Something. I don't know. It was very curious fact to me that Philadelphia was actually named after a city in Egypt. So
yeah.
Well, and the property
I never thought about
that later became Washington D.C. was called Rome.
Yeah. Yeah. It's deep. We can get into all this, but I mean, this really gets into these onomantic principles of names carrying some sort of sacred or esoteric meaning.
Right.
I mean, look,
energy.
I mean, and who knows why it happens? Maybe there was like strong intention by secret societies or something like that. Or sometimes people were just like, we don't know what to call this place. Let's open the Bible and put our finger down on it because Philadelphia is in the Bible. You can go through the Virginia countryside, and I don't think anybody really notices or whatever, but you can go through the Virginia countryside and you'll come across like little towns called Syria. How'd that happen?
Similar in Texas. I mean, you have Palestine, you have Paris, you have all sorts of, and they're tiny little towns. They're not, Paris, Texas is not Paris, France.
Right. Well, I don't know if Ostick looked ahead of my slides and perhaps is anticipating a poem that JFK quoted at the Whiskeytown Dam inauguration called American Names. And we're going to talk about that a little bit in regards to onomancy. But that's probably 10 slides away, and we got to hustle.
All right. Do you want me to read the caption you have for this slide, or do you want to move forward?
I don't know what slide it is. No, I'm going to start off talking about it. What I want you to do is I want you to read the plaque at Dealey Plaza, but I want to set this up first, okay?
Okay.
So what we're looking at right now, and I did not know this, we've looked from an aerial view. We have looked at the triple underpass and the 3 different roads that are the site of the Kennedy assassination, Elm, Commerce, and Main. And we've come up with all different sorts of interesting theories about this, how the trident is associated with the cross, and how it looks like a tree, which is on the cover of Macmillan's Golden Bough, which was released from the Macmillan office from the Texas School Book Depository. I sound like I'm on drugs. But something we didn't do, there were these like I think they start with P's. I forget their name, but they're like these white barriers there. And I said, these are going to become important at some point. And there were actually 2 obelisks there. There's only 1 obelisk there right now. And we're going to look a little closer at that. But the second obelisk has been replaced. It was taken down and replaced by a statue of Dealey himself. And I'm going to have Jordan read so just to put us in the environment, I'm just going to have Jordan read the plaque that's available to everybody on the obelisk that is at Dealey Plaza.
A place I've been often. All right. Dealey Plaza, birthplace of Dallas. Within this small park was built the first home, which also served as the first courthouse and post office, the first store, and the first fraternal lodge, dedicated to the pioneers of civic progress by order of the park board.
Yeah, so this is not a like taboo sort of conspiracy thing. I mean, it's things like this that make people like Hoffman and Downer go, aha, I got you. I've got it all figured out. This is a total Freemasonic ritual. I think obviously for those who've been following along, I think there's something much bigger at work here. Whatever conspiracy elements are not as interesting to me as the supernatural elements that are at play. But you see that this is like an Art Deco obelisk that has 14 parts. It has 13 different segments, and at the very top, it has a flame, which is going to be intriguing, but because later on, JFK is going to be memorialized with the eternal flame. So in a way, it's prefiguring it. So, you could say that this coincidence, this synchronicity, the shadowy group X had this all planned out, and one day they're going to kill a man named Kennedy, which means ugly head, and they're going to transmit this message that he needs to go visit the tomb of the unknown soldier and be inspired by it and be memorialized with the eternal flame, and then they're going to put it in it. You start having to do this thing where it's like way too much for human hands to do this. That's my personal opinion. Like, I think this is God, okay? Or the collective unconscious, or whatever you want to talk about. Okay. And people may not be satisfied with that or think I'm being naive, but I think I've shown throughout this whole study that there's something much bigger at work here. Now, what's interesting about this is, and I'm going to talk about this in the next slide, there is some sort of confusion about the association between Osiris and the obelisk, okay? And what it actually means. This is sort of a misunderstanding that gets passed around based on the misinterpretations from ancient Greek sources, which we'll look at momentarily. But what I do want to say is the idea, my understanding of Egyptian religion is when Osiris what was killed, he was memorialized in the heavens. His soul went to the constellation Orion, okay, which is very interesting to me. And so I was kind of like, okay, there is this Osiris Orion connection. And I just kind of went for a dig. And wouldn't you know, the third man, or the high priest Walter Cronkite, was able to announce that the president had been slain was a man named Orion Samuelson. And his name, even his name translates to the resurrected star god, son of the prophet who anoints the king. He was the third to announce the JFK death. I believe he was at a state fair, maybe in Iowa, I think. And he's like, I don't know, he's in the midst of like pig contests and things like that. And he's like, by the way, the president has been killed. Because I think he had a contact to somebody who was there on the ground, so like a photographer or something like that. The story is all very interesting. But he actually scooped Cronkite on this. And so Orion in some ways gets mixed into the Osirian figure of JFK in this narrative. Now, potentially interesting in all this is where my understanding of this, I have to get my glasses on here and read this, where Orion was in the night sky. So on November 22nd, rising in the east at 8 p.m. Central, the celestial Osiris emerged just as the sun in Scorpio, the mythical slayer of the hunter, set signaling an astrological transition from physical death to mythic immortality. Astronomically, this evening rise marked Orion's seasonal return to dominance with a 36% waxing crescent moon, roughly 13 to 14 days into its cycle, marrying the 13 fragments and 14-piece Osirian ritual of resurrection. Maybe I am not some expert. Okay. Obviously, I've cribbed this from AI. I think this is probably true. I don't know. But I think this is very intriguing that there is a potentially an Orion alignment with Osiris. So I'm going to pause there for a second and just kind of get some feedback before I go into the next element of this and what I want Jordan to read for us. Are you guys surprised that Orion is somehow in the mix of the JFK assassination?
I guess I'm not shocked, but I didn't put this aspect together before. Yeah. And we talked a lot about, I think, the deaths of Orion in prior
we have
lectures.
In regards to the Artemis mission and whether or not it was going to be successful, because the capsule for the Artemis mission is named Orion, and through Greek mythology, Artemis ends up inadvertently killing Orion. I believe Apollo tricks her into shooting Orion with her arrow. There's also another story about the earth goddess Gaia sending a scorpion to kill Orion. And I'm like, archetypally, and I think I've been actually proven out on this, there's reason to think that because of this narrative structure being in place, intentionally or not, I think it kind of signals that the Artemis mission is a no-go. And that seems, I mean, for all sorts of physical reasons, it's not, but narratively, it sinks. And so far, since I started picking up on that, you know, they kept delaying, and now they're not going to launch to try. They're not even try to land on the moon until 2028. And originally, they're going to try to do it last year, or whatever, or earlier this year. Who knows? And the problem is the Orion capsule. Either it's the heat shields or something else.
It's pretty crazy. And like this is so on the nose, this obelisk, the 13th segments of it. And it's like I think it was with Osiris that he was chopped off in 13 parts and distributed everywhere, and then he was built back together. It's very on the nose, this particular tower. And like the way you're describing the fifth point, you say, and now it feels very artistic in a way. I don't want to say that, but it's like if you look at from above, there's a trident and there's the car going down, and there's a splash of blood, and that blood, it flows down into the river, and the river is called Trinity again, and then that it's just like it's like you're spreading blood. So it looks to me like that, the way that sentence is written, and it's like it looks pretty artistic from that standpoint. But yeah, I'm very surprised that they had this obelisk there.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what else to say. It's crazy, right? I don't know why I just found it like the past week or two. You'd think that this would generate more attention than it does, but it was, I mean, Jordan, you've been to it. Do you remember seeing this there?
Not really. I'm sure I have Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things packed into that little area.
Yeah.
I mean, surely I've seen it. I didn't think about it. And I typically don't, when I visit more recently, I typically don't spend a ton of time right in that area because usually it is a little bit more touristy busy, if that makes sense.
There's just so
But
much to see. I can see how it would get lost in the shuffle.
yeah, I tend to spend more time closer to the memorial, which is, I think, on the other side of the courthouse.
Yeah.
So, but it is, yeah, I mean, all these things are right there. The birthplace of Dallas, well, the cabin, I think, is right adjacent
Yeah,
to the
it's
memorial.
I think
And
it's a
then
couple
this
hundred
is
feet
like,
away.
this is kind of the viewing spot, one of the viewing spots that people kind of use to look at the road with the big X on it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what do you
Also,
Oh, sorry.
this says Chicago, but it reminds me that Dallas used to be this massive hub for distributing records, for distributing music. And I think that is relevant. Dallas is this weird amplification spot, this place of transmitting frequencies throughout a lot of the country.
No, I hadn't really thought about Dallas music very much. That's a point. That's a good point. By the way, of this picture of Orion Samuelson, I'm not super familiar with his narrative. Seems like a really interesting guy, but I imagine he was kind of doing like the man on the street reporting and was going to a bunch of different locations. And maybe at some point he did have a stint at this radio station 720 WG in Chicago, but I don't know for sure. Something I want to say about the Orion Osiris connection, how interesting it would be. I mean, we've looked at all these different figures, whether it be Christ, Adonis, Attis, Ulysses, whoever's mapping on to JFK. Is this the first one where we've had this like direct connection to the stars, right? Where the Orion is the abode, at least of the soul of Osiris, and like the most memorable thing, at least in my mind, about the JFK presidency is going to the stars, and that's where Osiris goes. So how does that figure into the space mission? How does that figure into Apollo?
This Osiris find like these connections are pretty strong. I'm very happy with them. Like whenever they come up, I'm like, wow. In isolation, I would never have realized this obelisk would have anything to do with JFK in any form, or like even if someone would have told me that maybe it represents that, I would have thought it as a coincidence. But in a way, it seems so appropriate to what happened after in the aftermath of his death. Like it literally looks like a rocket,
Yeah.
and then it's like a combination of different symbols, and like it's pretty good. I'm very happy and satisfied with this. As like no notes.
Great, thank you. Well, the other thing I wanted to point out here is, I've been trying to get my head around the whole Trinity River thing. I think part of it is part of the waterworks agenda that JFK did, because he visited the Trinity, a different Trinity River a few weeks beforehand in California, which is connected to this Whiskey Town Dam project. And so there is this continuity between what they want to do for the Trinity River in Dallas and what it was doing out in California. And of course, there's the continuity with the Trinity test. But I mean, I'm trying to think about it in regards to the Holy Trinity. I mean, clearly we haven't really talked about this too, but there is this Holy Trinity in Egyptian religion as well, with Horus, Isis, and Osiris. So that makes the Osiris connections tighter, if you ask me, and perhaps like offers this blend between Christ and Osiris, or Christ and Horus, I should say, when we look at it in other lenses. And one of the other things I wanted to point out here, I think one of the very first things that got us really down this road, even before we got really into the minutia of the Golden Bough, was how I started picking up on this Jack and the Beanstalk narrative that was in the Apollo missions, because we found the moon seeds, right, the moon trees, and how they're all over the country and the world, and how they were taking vegetation to the moon. And I think this was really got my mind about it being some type of vegetation ritual. And from that, I started getting into the ecology movement and the blue marbles connection to environmentalism. But revisiting it, I mean, you could potentially make the case that the whole Jack and the Beanstalk narrative fits these pillars, these obelisks, and Jack scaling them. Now, I think it fits. This is where I got confused this morning, because I was like, well, is Jack climbing the obelisk, or is it this other pillar in Egyptian mythology known as the Djed? I think it's probably closer to that, and I think Frazer's going to talk about it a little bit later on. So I had to get some clarity on this. So if we can go to the next slide, Jordan, I think we'll skip the recitation there because we're 46 minutes in. So, this is, I almost, I kind of broke out in a cold sweat when I saw this. I had sort of just assumed, because I've been swimming in a lot of alternative media for so long, that the obelisk was the remembered member of Osiris. I mean, everybody says that, and I guess I just thought that was common knowledge. And in fact, modern Egyptologists don't say that, from what I could tell, because when I was interrogating my AI to be like, hey, I need clarity on this, it's actually connected to Ra. And as I showed earlier with the genealogy of the Egyptian gods and how they track onto the Greek gods, Ra is not clearly Ra is not Osiris, and Ra is Zeus, and Osiris we saw as like Hades or Dionysus. So this is a problem, and it's modern Egyptologists, I guess they say the obelisk is a petrified beam of light. It anchors the heavens to the temple and marks sacred boundaries, and the hieroglyphic texts and temple inscriptions identifying them as Tekenu to Pierce and Benben primordial mound. I was like, okay, I have disseminated misinformation. And in fact, this misinformation has been going on a long time. It's actually traceable to Plutarch and Diodorus. They were kind of the ones who did this conflation where they said that the obelisk was the member of Osiris that Isis put back together, right? And the reason for this is that the hieroglyphs, the reason why modern Egyptologists say that this is wrong is that the hieroglyphics were not properly deciphered at some point. So and Frazer himself doesn't necessarily say, oh, obelisks are the member. He talks about pillars. I think he's going to go into these Djed columns at some point later on in the chapter. In general, he kind of just assumes that they are, because I think he's working off of Plutarch and Diodorus, and that's also where the Masonic and occult traditions get this idea, because clearly there in Dealey Plaza, in their obelisk, they have made a reference to Osiris by having the 14 different segments, right, with the flame on top. But that kind of shows how that there's actually some conflation and confusion here, and Egyptology is like not this, we've got it all figured out. Like, this is kind of a clarification. I'm not exactly sure when the clarification happened, where they tried to extricate the obelisk from the story of Osiris and get it firmly attached to Ra. I don't know how much it really matters, because we have hundreds of years of associations of the obelisk with Osiris. So that's where this comes from. And if Jordan, you want to go to the next slide. This to show the difference, the pillar that is more associated with Osiris from what modern Egyptologists say is this thing called the Djed pillar. Okay. And I guess it represents the backbone of Osiris, stability, and ultimately it's connected to the resurrection, the raising and restitution of individuals. Whereas and I think they're smaller. I think they were like people would be buried with them and whatnot. And there's I've looked into it a little bit, but each of the segments they're like 4 different segments mean different things. And to distinguish that from the Tekenu or the obelisk and how it's more connected to Ra or the sun rays. So I don't know. This is just one of those things that I don't know what to make about this. Like, the error I don't even know if it's an error. Like, I don't know if these modern Egyptologists are right. I'm just telling you what the body of knowledge is. For a long time, people thought these obelisks were connected to Osiris. It's updated and changed, but yet we're still all kind of acting off the old information, and we're reluctant to change it. And we're still going to make monuments that reference Osiris in the obelisk. So
that was going to be my next point. Like, even if that is not what it originally was, is that how people are still using it today? And so it kind of takes on that meaning, even if the original meaning wasn't that. But it is very hard for us to know what these things originally were intended to be used as. There are commonalities or similarities between both of them, and they're both referencing masculine penetrative energy. So
right.
I do think some of the underlying mythologem layer of it is not necessarily completely different, but mythologem is the expression of the archetype, correct?
Yeah.
So the mythologems are slightly different. They have different representations, but they are sort of connected to a very similar energy.
Right. I mean, and this raises an interesting question. Like, does it even matter? Right. Like, when there's such a momentum that goes with all this stuff, it kind of becomes the thing after it's been assumed for so long.
I think it depends on your purpose and your goal with the information. If your purpose is to understand the culture of origin, certainly it matters. But if you're trying to just make sense of the mythology that surrounds us, they sort of merge in a way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it raises all sorts of interesting questions. Like, how do we know any of what the interpretation of ancient Egypt is? Like, this gets into like this. See, this triggers my radical skepticism. It's like, okay, you're telling me all these different stories about, Isis being associated with Sirius, and, Osiris being the incarnation or his essence, like causing the Nile to flood and all those other things. Like,
well,
how do we know?
Back.
Like, how do we know? How do we know? We allowed this Plutarch Diodorus thing to go on for centuries.
Yes.
And like, oopsies. Like, so I guess what I'm trying to say here is, and I'm not trying to like relitigate all of Egyptology. If you were at that, I have in my mind like the scene from Stargate where James Spader is like saying that there's a certain aspect of the inscription in the pyramid is a fraud, and everybody's like, like, and they laugh at him and they walk out or whatever. If you go into a modern Egyptologist meeting and say, "Oh, the obelisk, which is clearly Osiris's phallus," I think they might laugh at you, and they won't take you seriously. I think.
I'm not sure. We could ask some. There are quite a few around here, but it calls back to me the criticism that Wittgenstein, if I'm saying that correctly, thank you, made about Frazer, which is he is sort of projecting onto these cultures the intentions sometimes, because it's not like he sat down and interviewed them. And so, we're making sense of it. I think this is pervasive through all of anthropology. So
I mean, it's wild.
It's
wild with the whole Egyptology thing, because supposedly, like, I mean, I'm not some expert, but like, it's not like my understanding is that like modern Egyptians did not pass this knowledge onto the Europeans, right? Like, this was, largely the product of like Napoleonic conquest, right? and investigation from the colonialism of the British, so we're having like Europeans put together this story because it fell into disuse. I mean, the people in Egypt, from my understanding, don't read this language. So we're like,
they say it's not them, basically, is what my understanding is. They're like, we didn't do this. I don't know exactly the intellectual lineage of Egyptology. I don't want to speak in depth to it, but yeah, I mean, we're not interfacing directly with this culture. So
no, you think something. Like, I just thought it was common knowledge that the obelisk was Osiris's phallus.
Whoops. I assumed too. Whoops. I've been making jokes about it.
But maybe at some point it does become that. I don't know. Like,
it is in our culture. Today, it is in conspiracy culture. That's what it means to everyone there.
I mean, even the conspiracy people or the people who supposedly planned this, they were working off the information from Plutarch. So like,
true.
They have made it happen. Now, even if it was not associated with Osiris, now it is. Now they have made it happen. It's like,
well, that raises a very interesting question about whether or not Egyptian religion is ancient or modern. Could it be a entire construction of like, the past like couple hundred years?
I think very possibly. And it's probably messier than it's probably not a binary, like all things fit into one box very neatly.
Yeah.
No, okay. I think Egypt, it existed.
Oh, see, this gets into some outrageous. This is a pretty big digression.
As I'm sitting here wearing an ankh, so like it's.
I'll just say this. There's no mention of pyramids in the Bible.
Sure.
And the Israelites were supposedly the slaves of the Egyptians.
There's also pyramids all around the world.
What's going on?
Why are there pyramids in America? Why are there
Yes, it raises all sorts of interesting questions.
Okay.
Right.
We probably need to keep going.
Huh? I don't know, but I'm skeptical. And this conflation doesn't help my skepticism. Okay. Let's proceed.
The JFK legacy and the Temple of Dendur are intertwined through a modern retelling of the Osiris myth, where the martyred king's memory is preserved by a devoted widow. Just as Isis resurrected the dismembered Osiris, Jacqueline Kennedy acted as a symbolic Isis by securing the Temple of Dendur, a monument to Osirified drowned brothers, to serve as a permanent piece of her husband's Camelot legacy. This Egyptian corner of New York creates a profound visual dialogue between the temple, a lunar Isis symbol, and the nearby Central Park obelisk, a solar Osiris symbol, which was installed with Masonic rites that mirrored ancient funerary traditions. This narrative of resurrection is physically anchored by the Aswan High Dam. While the dam threatens to submerge the Nile's history, JFK's administration intervened with critical funding to control the river's waters, mirroring Osiris's role as the ancient master of the Nile inundation. By preserving the Temple of the Nile from the very flooding they once celebrated, the Kennedys effectively unified the roles of the ancient god and modern sovereign, transforming a potential erasure into a symbolic reunion of the divine couple within the sanctuary of the Metropolitan Museum of Art.
Perfection. Thank you so much. So, I think Jordan beautifully communicated the essential aspects of this slide that I have here prepared for us. Really, it's just getting into the idea of JFK being an Osirian figure associated with bodies of water. And we're going to look at this further when we look at the different dams. But we've talked about this in previous podcasts about the role that Jackie played in rescuing the Temple of Dendur, which Jordan pointed out that got moved to the Metropolitan Museum, and the Cleopatra's Needle that was erected even before that it got there, and how it served as her nightlight from across the street in her apartment. You can see here in the bottom left-hand corner, this is flooded by the Aswan Low Dam in 1906 to understand what we were dealing with. Now, the whole complex couldn't be, what Osik was saying earlier about how there seems to be all this transplantation that's going on from these different cultures. The whole complex couldn't be transplanted to America. So we just have this Temple of Dendur, which I believe Jackie, if memory serves me correctly, wanted to have on the Potomac River and potentially have as a memorial to JFK. So I'd say that this is some of the strongest evidence about the connections between Osiris, Isis, Jackie, and JFK by the rescuing of this complex that memorialized and venerated both of those Egyptian deities.
Yeah, super fun.
Something to think about. I was trying to get my mind around, like, how am I supposed to understand? Because I'm like, is this Osiris in the stars? Is he in the underworld? Is he in the land? I mean, it's like the Nile is like the bloodstream of this corn god. And I think Frazer talks about how when the Nile floods and overwhelms the land, which is seen as kind of like the female element of this, it's fertilizing the land to make the crops grow, which is interesting, right? To think about, like, there's kind of this this divine conception that's happening through the land and through the water. Typically, when I think of water, given how much we've associated it with like the maternal matrix, I think of it being feminine, right? But in this case, it's connected to Osiris.
I think a crude fact that might explain this is that Egyptians used to have these festivals where the men or some priests, they kind of masturbated into the river, and they
Did
said that
they?
we are fertilizing it.
Did
Yeah.
Frazer say that?
He did not say that. I have read it somewhere else, but it's true. And it's like
They did.
that's why they thought that that will fertilize the land.
That doesn't
That's how.
surprise me, given that Frazer talks about them like throwing money and offerings and things like that into the water to kind of give it some juice. But would it surprise me if that's the case? I'd be curious if you have a moment, Stick, to look that up while we're on stream, if you can find a reference for that, because that detail is quite interesting. We can circle back to it, but obviously there's more to cover. Jordan, do you want to say anything else about this slide?
I've heard what Ostic is mentioning before. I can't recall from where, or anything about it, but
it's crazy how they transported this needle, the Cleopatra's needle, to Central Park, and the image shows you I think there was something like 9,000 Masons that showed up for the erecting of this needle. It was a big deal at the time. So not a lot of documentation of it because it's from 1880, but you can see it here as it originally stood in Alexandria.
So much of the artifacts were taken to London.
Yep.
And you have them there in the British Museum. You have a lot of Egyptian artifacts in the DC Smithsonian.
Yep.
I wonder if there's also some at the Vatican.
There is an obelisk at the Vatican. I forget.
Is it from Egypt?
I believe it is.
Because those would be the 3 non-state territories. I'm blanking on the proper word for it, but those are the 3 cities that are outside of. I guess the British Museum isn't in the city of London.
But there's people talking about this in conspiracy circles, like the DC, the city of London, the Vatican. Like the rules don't necessarily apply to them in the same way. That they're like elite banking centers.
Right. I mean, they're their own jurisdictions. I think technically the British Museum would be in London proper and not City of London, which is what you would be talking about there. But that's interesting to me that the Egyptian artifacts have been exported to those 3 places. And then New York, of course, is a power center. But super weird.
If someone wants to look it up about the one at the Vatican, which we definitely should discuss at some point, especially since it's an epicenter of Christianity. From what I understand, if memory serves me correctly, the obelisk at the Vatican has a cross on the top. So I think it was reconstituted and assembled there. But then I think one of the popes was like, oh, wait, we have to either nullify this like pagan association or show the supremacy of Christ on top of like the pagan substrate. And so a cross was put on top of it.
Oh, wow. Is it St. Peter's?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a photo of it. It does have a cross on top.
Mm-hmm. I don't know exactly where it came from.
That's a pretty prominent placement. That's not like in my head, and I've been there and I don't remember. In my head, it would be like, oh, like we just have it somewhere. Like this is like the center of at least where tourists are. I'm sure there's like.
And not to be outdone, I mean, clearly you have the dome there as well, and a lot of the people who talk about the sacred architecture that's in DC will draw analogies between this and the Capitol building and the Washington Monument that's in DC. And I mean, I watch like the local weather, and they show like the sun coming up, and I see like both the Capitol and this obelisk, and I can't help but think about the interaction between Isis and Osiris.
Totally.
Osik, you think you have a source here on this?
I cannot send links to the comments. Like whenever I send a link, it turns it into it's like I just Googled it and it gave
Send it
me
to us on
a post on
Instagram.
Reddit. Oh, okay. I'll send it to you. But like I just wanted to riff on the St. Peter's Square thing. Is it St. Peter's Square in Vatican City?
I don't know if it's called Square, but I mean, it's St. Peter's Basilica is the church.
Okay. I mean, St. Peter's was the guy who had the keys to the kingdom of heaven, right? So if that is him, and there's a needle, so I thought that maybe like needle could unlock. Because you usually use needles to pick locks. So I don't know. Maybe it's like I'm just trying to think of a inverse kind of symbolism there, because a lot of people say that the Vatican is not the real Vatican because church should be personal, should not be Roman Catholic. A lot of people talk about that, but like I thought like if it's a key, it's a place for keys, and it fits in a square, that like the Cleopatra's needle might be going through the keyhole or something, trying to
That's
unlock.
interesting. That's interesting. Just a little bit of background here. The Vatican obelisk is a 4,000-year-old, 25.36 meter tall red granite Egyptian obelisk located in the center of St. Peter's Square, Vatican City. Originally from Heliopolis, it was brought to Rome by Caligula in 37 AD, previously standing in Nero's circus before being moved to its current location by Domenico Fontana in 1586. The top originally had a metal ball, long rumored to contain the ashes of Julius Caesar, but it was found empty by Domenico Fontana and is now in a museum. It now bears a cross containing a relic of the true cross. So they're telling me like the cross that Jesus was crucified upon is actually in. I gotta go. We'll go deeper. That's the gist. Okay.
Yeah, this is
From
all
Heliopolis.
Insane. And then the columns of the Pantheon are also from Egypt. This obsession with extracting things from that region and exporting it around the world, and to Rome, to the Americas. It is not an easy endeavor. It's pretty insane. I found a cracked.com article talking about what Ostic brought up. And
cracked, is that cracked like Mad Magazine cracked?
Yeah. Cracked has been around a long time.
I know, but isn't like cracked like satire?
No. Well, no. It's
Cracked
usually just like weird stuff.
Okay.
And
sorry.
Their citation for what they are saying is Internet Archive. They linked this book, The Intimate History of the Orgasm,
by who?
It's from the New York Grove Press.
Jonathan Margolis.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so,
All right. We'll use that as a data point.
I didn't read through the citation itself. I skimmed the Cracked article. It's been
good.
While this was like my favorite website in high school, I'm sure.
It's so weird. When I was a kid, I read Mad and Cracked magazine. Cracked was like the Temu version of Mad magazine. And now there's like a serious like intellectual.
Maybe it's not the same. But like my whole internet life, that's been like the go-to place for funny, bizarre, like weird information, but it isn't satire. It's just a curation of kind of the weirdest stuff. And then they also reference this article by Mildred Europa Taylor. So.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just looked up, we're digressing, but it is the same Cracked company.
Is it?
So Cracked was the major competitor in Mad Magazine. And at some point, I guess in the 2000s, they pivoted to this. So they were
interesting.
That's where it started.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess when it went out of print and it became a website, it it pivoted to this. That's funny.
Yeah.
You can understand if you look at old crack magazines, you can understand my skepticism when they were like, "You're citing
Fair enough. This
crack."
is one of those generational exposing details.
Yeah, it would be like, "Oh, Alfred E. Newman says." I was like, "Wait, the mascot for?"
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, let's move forward. Okay.
You got it.
Where are we? Are we talking about fish?
Yeah. Would you like me to read the passage?
Yes, I would.
The symbolic connections among John F. Kennedy, Osiris, and the Fisher King reveal a recurring archetype of the wounded ruler whose vitality reflects the health of the nation. Within this framework, the White House Fish Room became a symbolic aquatic chamber where Kennedy displayed a sailfish caught during his honeymoon, transforming a sporting trophy into a mythic emblem of masculine vitality and mastery over the unconscious sea, echoing ancient associations between kingship, fertility, and water. The fish's sword like bill functioned as a symbolic restoration of generative power, reminiscent of the Osiris myth, while Kennedy's assassination in Dallas cast him into the role of the maimed king, whose death triggers cultural mourning and mythic transformation. Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis reinforced this narrative through the Camelot legend, while the ocean-facing John F. Kennedy Presidential Library and Museum, designed by I.N. Pei, extended the symbolism through the architectural motifs of sea, light, and renewal, with Kennedy's sailboat, Victoria, acting as a modern solar bark. Meanwhile, a deer trophy from a hunt arranged by Lyndon B. Johnson added a darker layer of symbolism, evoking the sacrificial victim and the vulnerability of the king, leaving Kennedy symbolically surrounded by images of both the hunter and the hunted, a visual expression of the Fisher King's paradoxical burden.
Fantastic. So these images were crazy when I came across them. And I think when I showed this to Jordan 2 weeks ago, she even pointed out that there's something Christic to them as well, given that Christ is associated with the symbol of the fish, not only through the feeding of the 5,000, but as a transitional figure from the Piscean age to the Aquarian age. And when you start to look at these things, they jump out in a different way. You can see here on the top, on the right hand corner, where JFK and Jackie caught this fish in Acapulco in 1953. It's absolutely wild. He had it mounted and put in what was known as the fish room. I think that was just tentatively what they called it. And it's so intriguing when you think about the role that the fish plays in the consumption of the phallus. And then the sailfish has this protruding rostrum. It's not a proboscis, but a rostrum of power that is there in the fish room. And as I was diagnosing that, looking at this dismembered deer head, which we've seen JFK interact with deer. There was that image from a previous podcast where he was feeding the deer bread, kind of like a sacramental idea, right? When associating him with the bread and the grain-like dimensions of these dying and rising vegetative gods. But you can, I don't know, is it projecting? You reading too much into it, or is it a sign potentially of the foreshadowing Osirian narrative that is going to unfold with him? And the reason why this caught my eye is I was reading the Torches Past book from the AP Press, and they talked about, from the fish room, LBJ announced the National Day of Mourning. I believe, did he do this on the 25th or did he do it on Thanksgiving? It's right there on the 23rd. He did it on Saturday, November 23rd, 1963. He made the announcement about the National Day of Mourning for President Kennedy from the fish room. I think that might have been the same time he renamed the Cape Canaveral to Cape Kennedy. It might have been the same day. I'll have to check my notes on that. So that's what got me down this whole thing. Like, there's a fish room in the White House. Okay. Like, this just further by itself. I don't know if I ever would have been like, oh, because there's a just giant sailfish on the wall, this is clearly the Osiris narrative. But all of it together, it's like, okay, that's there. That's kind of like, I'm like going on this little treasure hunt looking for all the different elements, and there's the fish. You buying this, Ostic? You like this? You hate it?
I don't. I was trying to think of it from the perspective of the movie Shining. I'm trying to think of because Halloran's room, from where he calls, he has this fish, not as prominent as a sailfish or like with hunted and thing, but like he has a fish hanging on his wall. So I thought of him because earlier I used to associate Halloran with Christ in my personal theories. I thought like he's the Christ figure because he is having these fish, and he gets sacrificed too. Then I thought like that. But now, yeah, it kind of makes sense that this fish has this Christic imagery. I was also thinking about November 23. This is aside from what you said. I think what you said speaks for itself. Just that November 23. What could be November 23? 2311. Okay. November is 9. So 239. But 9 is also the ninth month of the year. Is September. But September is 7. So 237. So that's how I was progressing in my head.
You've
Like
got that.
the day of mourning is 237. Like after
that,
so many steps.
Yeah, you've got that ecstatic gematria.
Yeah, but
vibe.
Yeah, you can make any connection like that. But yeah, I think the Christic imagery is pretty prominent. Like we have seen it from a lot of different angles already with the Apollo thing and the Attis and the Adonis thing. It's like it keeps reoccurring.
I mean, this sailfish, the fact that it has the protruding rostrum that is kind of, it's like it is consumed and is projecting out the obelisk. You know, it's like it has assimilated the member. I think we lost Ostic for a moment, but that's I mean, of all the fishes that could be on the wall, like it could just be a catfish or a bass or something like that, but it's got one with this rostrum of power.
Well put.
Sailfish are pretty hard to catch, I think. They're very dangerous.
Yeah. I think people have gotten speared with them, which is interesting in and of itself, given that, we've talked about all this these brushes with fate. I don't know too much about the catching of this fish outside of when it happened, but getting it into the boat. I mean, I know that people have been impaled by these fishes.
Yeah.
So, and that kind of gets into the whole killing of the king and surviving it and all the different last rites that were given to JFK, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let's talk about boats. I'll let Jordan read here in a minute, but because there's something that's prepared for this, but going across all this different JFK research, it's impossible to not see him and the family on boats, specifically him and Jackie early on, and then Jackie later on with Aristotle on this boat, the Christina. And even when they have these little sailboats, they almost seem kind of Egyptian to me. And I don't know, you see on the sailboat, it's got I believe it has a fish on the sail. And I wonder if this is just kind of the Osiris narrative bleeding through into the reality. So Jordan, why don't you read the caption?
Yeah. In Egyptian mythology, boats symbolize the passage between life, death, and divinity, with water journeys representing the soul's movement through cosmic and underworld realms. Isis appears as the active navigator of this liminal space, traveling the Nile marshes in a papyrus boat while searching for the scattered remains of Osiris and serving as both guide and protector through dangerous waters. Over time, her role expanded into that of Isis Pelagia, a maritime patroness credited in later traditions with inventing the sail and steering the divine rudder that guides ships and souls alike. In contrast, Osiris represents the sacred cargo and ultimate destination of the funerary voyage. His cult centers on the Neshmet bark, ceremonially carried during the Great Procession at Abydos, which reenacts his death, resurrection, and journey into the afterlife. Within this symbolic structure, Isis embodies motion, guidance, and protection, across the waters, while Osiris represents the divine kingdom that lies at the journey's end, together forming the mythic template for the Egyptian belief that the deceased must board a symbolic vessel to reach the realm of Osiris beyond death.
Fantastic. So I've kind of said my piece about this. Ostic or Jordan, would you like to add anything?
The Truman Show just comes to mind. The
It does,
sailboat
doesn't it?
is such a big focal point. Yeah.
That is interesting. You know, I wonder if one could, knowing that, I wonder if one could go back and watch the Truman Show and see this Osiris story in it. I have never seen that, and that would be a very intriguing project for somebody, maybe us.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense because Truman is a Christ figure, right? He's the true man, right? He does the Christ pose at the end and does the bow.
Right.
And he's got the Christoph, the father, who this gets into Gnostic themes about him not, I guess you could say he's not the Christ. And potentially a demiurge. So that's interesting. I find it interesting too that the boat that she sailed on a lot with Aristotle was called Christina. Of course, I think that was named after Christina Onassis, obviously.
That jumped out to me as well.
Yeah, but obviously the name Christina comes from Christ.
Right.
Or doesn't it? I better be sure.
Well, check. I mean, especially this spelling of it.
Yeah. What do you think, Ostic?
I'm just surprised that they were able to catch that sailfish with a boat this small. It's almost a kayak. It's like that's such a formidable fish, and like they're just moving around like that guy in Old Man in the Sea.
I'm not certain. I would find it highly unlikely that the sailfish was caught on the sailboat that Jackie and JFK are on. I'm assuming that was a separate escapade, like they were just sailing, because how would you bring that thing in on that small boat? So I am assuming they caught it on a different boat. But which one, I don't know, which could be interesting. Christina means follower of Christ. Okay. Or the anointed one. So that kind of makes it even more interesting that she was going around in the Christina. This kind of contributes to the searching for Osiris and going to the other side. I like that. I feel like that needs to be developed more. I think you're muted, Jordan.
I was just agreeing. Yeah.
Okay. How about we take a 5-minute break, guys? Oh, okay. Sure.
Okay. I was thinking like he's doing such daring things, like JFK is catching a sailfish. I thought that maybe there could be some correlation with Hercules or the 7 labors of Hercules or something like that.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure. I've not even looked at it. I bet it's there because all these heroic figures are there. They're all descending upon JFK for some reason.
Yeah, just that. Then I thought like maybe it could be
added to the mix. Sure. There's always room for another. We got King Arthur, we got Osiris, we got Attis, we got Adonis, we got Ulysses. Yeah. Go ahead. Let's throw Hercules in there. So 5-minute break, guys.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, let's jump back into the next slide. Okay, so there's a lot that could be said here. What I want to introduce is a figure that I have come across, and I mentioned this in the title card. This figure of John C. Lilly. Last time we talked about how Nick Land might be appropriate when we start thinking about the archetypal expression that we see in the 20th century and the seemingly controlled demolition of reality that's gone on in a lot of the 21st century. I'm still trying to understand. I've messed around with this a little bit last night. If we look at the theophanic structuralism idea that I've been developing, there's a question about the cycles of history, if they're tightening or they're expanding, right? Because it seems like we've covered a fair amount of ground in the past 80 years or so. Does that mean the next cycle will be faster, longer, or are they all the same unit? And I think land is appropriate to think about in regards to this, especially when you're talking about like an AI from the future building its body and destroying all of society so that individuals could be sucked into it. But there's this other person, I've been talking to Jordan about it all week. This other individual, John C. Lilly, that I found. He is pretty well known in a lot of psychedelic circles, which I probably catered to my prejudice and I wrote him off. But I've come back around and started to look at a lot of these different figures. In the 50s and 60s, what he was doing, he developed the isolation tank and was taking drugs like ketamine and LSD and whatnot and having these altered states. And he believed he got in contact with this thing that he calls echo, or at least saw some of the workings of it, that it's called the Earth Coincidence Control Office. That there are these sort of like aliens, entities, angels, archetypes, whatever you want to talk about, that are actually responsible for like editing time and making synchronicity happen in our reality. I have to say that this is an idea that I kind of like, because it does definitely seem that I am personally in some sort of dynamic relationship with what seems to be some sort of sentient reality, which drives my theory in general that this is not mere conspiracy theory, that this is actually a religious experience that we're all capable of participating in. So I think what that does, he also posited this idea of the solid state, the SSI, which I think he developed when computer technology was first coming onto the scene, talking about there being some sort of silicon-based life form that is also in opposition to the, I guess, benevolent echo forces that are trying to level up the consciousness of humanity through synchronicity. And I wondered if he is a bit of an ancestor to Land, and if Land himself sort of got this idea intentionally or not, but downstream from other thinkers of there being this AI from the future that is directing events. So I think it's appropriate when we start to see synchronicity in our reality to think about what John Lilly has posited here, as crazy an idea as that may seem, but we have long departed from consensus reality. So I think it's okay for us to talk about. And for individuals who do not know, John C. Lilly was also involved in dolphin communication. He spent a lot of time trying to communicate with them. I think I'm not an expert on this, but the potential cultural touchstone that some people my age or perhaps a little bit younger will recognize is there was a video game in the 90s called Echo the Dolphin, which is a beautiful game and very ecological in nature. But the whole story is based off of John Lilly's ideas. And apparently the developer of this game for the Sega Genesis was highly influenced by John C. Lilly and his interaction with dolphins. And that's where the video game came from. So
it's a super pretty game.
It is a great game.
Yeah.
Austin, had you encountered John C. Lilly or Echo the Dolphin?
I'd known about him since he inspired Ken Russell to make that movie called Altered States with William Hurt.
I want to see that. Is he in that? Is it like a documentary? What I've just kind of come across it in the research.
It's a movie about a guy who's obsessed with tapping into different religious experiences, and he, like, again, isolation chambers like Hunter Biden is doing, and then other things like going to Peru and doing shamanism, drinking ayahuasca, and having these very weird dreams. And it's like a sister film to 2001: A Space Odyssey with the Stargate sequence. That whole film is about that, and it's about him. It's like he's regressing back to his primordial form. He's trying to regress back. Like, I'm a man now, so what I was before. He's trying to regress back to this primordial sludge. That's what he's trying to do. He's going to become that sludge from which life itself originated, and he's doing those experiments. So that's what the movie is about. And then he has his wife or girlfriend who brings him out, who makes him whole again from that sludge. This idea is pretty good.
Like, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about applying this to 2001, not because it's not there, but it's obviously there. There's just so much to cover. And you could see how that might have been potentially an influence. I mean, he talked about last time in 2001, the stasis chambers being like coffins. yeah, what's going on with this? That's interesting. That's interesting. And it really does kind of communicate that reality itself is a bit of a training program. And so when we see these synchronicities that manifest with, Dealey Plaza or the nautical themes of JFK, or even the sailfish in the room, are these things that are attributable to Echo, that are like they're there for all. So there's like, I got his book in the mail yesterday. It's called The Scientist. It's his autobiography. And I want to go deeper into this, but I have like a lot of personal echoes, like even with Lily. Jordan and I went to the National Cathedral. All of a sudden dolphins are populating my lived experience right now. And when we went to the National Cathedral, I bumped into a woman who had a dolphin tattoo. And then on her other arm, she had a dragonfly, which to me was a clear reference to the Gilmore Girls, because that's where Lorelai works, the Dragonfly Inn, or the inn that she owns. And then this set in motion a whole string of synchronicities, which the capstone of it was I'm reading a Monet book right now, and Jordan was there for every single one of these. I ran into a guy who was wearing Monet's water lilies, like as kind of, and I talked to this woman with the dolphin tattoos about John C. Lilly, and it all just went bam, 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 bam. Jordan saw it unfold. Tell the people I'm not crazy. And and
if so you're crazy, I'm crazy.
Yeah. So there's like these very personal synchronicities that Echo seems to be planting, whatever it is, aliens, angels, whatever. He kind of saw it as like this bureaucratic management of Earth that there's he's working off the model of the solar system, so I guess there's ones for other planets in his view. But
something that sticks with me that Lily also said is you take on beliefs and then eventually you take them off again. So I kind of apply that to the way he frames things as well. Like, it's just one layer of reality or one way of looking at it. It doesn't make it's kind of beyond right or incorrect in a way. But that is like the working model that he is using and the belief structure that he is using to explain these things.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. He seemed to think that he had an experience. I don't know if he would consider that one that he could jettison, but maybe for us it's functional. Just interesting. I mean, I guess the thing is that the synchronicities like that are available for all. If it is one, say the sailfish in the fish room, that would be one that would be, I guess, a public breadcrumb from Echo. Whereas the ones when I'm talking about like having the Gilmore Girls like spill into my real life, or having the Gilmore Girls like manifest things that we talk about on this podcast, which has happened in spades this past week. I mean, in so many different ways. But yeah, it was funny. Jordan and I got in this like heated debate, and I said something along the lines of I don't like having conversations about things that aren't real. Like I couldn't get into sci-fi because I wasn't going to sit here and have like a theoretical debate about the physics of worlds that I don't inhabit. Like that's stupid and a waste of time for me. I have real things to study. And this is why I didn't study sci-fi when I was like in middle school or high school. Like I just couldn't, it had to be straight truth. I couldn't like sit here and be like, well, the gravity on Alpha Centauri. No, I'm not going to do that. And we were watching Gilmore Girls, and Luke and Lorelai get in a fight about Star Wars, and they start arguing over the physics of Star Wars. And Luke is like, the physics don't make any sense. And I'm just like, oh my God. Like that, it was like kind of our conversation. Whatever. No one cares.
No, I care.
What do you
I
think?
care.
Yeah, okay. All right.
I'm like
I'm
the
just sharing that.
normal Rockwell painting guy who's standing up. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
But that's a good thing that you bought his book. I think it
will be helpful.
Like yeah. Also, I like this idea. Like he's coming up with the solid state metascript in the 50s and 60s. That's pretty advanced as far as I'm concerned. It's like we don't even know what computers would be capable of, but he's like, I'm gonna do this. This is a good idea. I think his mind was broken up like an egg. His mind it's absorbing new ideas during that time.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm apparently my slides have restarted here. Jordan, are they visible on your end?
Yeah, we're still on the John C. Lilly.
Mine are reloading, so I can't see them.
Okay.
We might want to. So I can just riff. We might want to go to the next one if
Sure,
possible.
and I can access the notes.
Yeah. Well, so all this talk about land inspired me to look. I mean, I love a good visual diagram, and so I thought about. I came across this on Twitter, and I've seen it a million times before. I'm sure Ostic has too. About someone trying to analogize the CCRU's numogram to all these other different metaphysical maps that people have done. And I'm like, I've just been kind of curious. So like the things that we've been developing here in this theophanic structuralist view, I've been trying to work out with the AI, like, can we visually represent this in some way? And the most advanced AI that I use is the Gemini. And I think it's wonderful in comparison to the other ones I use. I think it kills Chat and Grok personally at this moment in time. Although I've found that they take turns being good at different things. But it is too deep for me to go into. It can't even really render it. It's like we're thinking about levels of cognition that have not been built into Gemini yet. So he's like, yeah, I can't do this. But I think at some point, I present this here because at some point I think something like this is going to have to be done. I think so much of what has been instrumental in developing this theory as we go through the Golden Bough has been obviously has been Jungian psychology, which was deeply influenced by Plato's theory of the forms, Kant's distinction between the noumenological and the phenomenological, and Schopenhauer's idea of the universal will, which you can see as a direct inspiration of the collective unconscious. So I think in some ways we can start to say, okay, at least these three different structures. Now, how you make Platonic metaphysics rhyme and visually cohere with Kantian diagrams and Schopenhauerian ones is, I think, quite the task. Not to mention that through the work with Wolfgang Pauli, Jung over time starts to develop this concept of the unus mundus. I speak about it as, this is something that he had the entire time. It was really kind of a later development, I think. And to me, everything's happening all at once when I read Jung. It doesn't really sort of capture the natural evolution, but that does, because he starts to see no clear distinction between matter and psyche, he ends up developing something like a dual aspect monism. So this is just an initial offering of how we may start to see things, but this diagram I have in here is far away from being fleshed out like these other ones. But I'd like to get my ideas and this and get it to this spot. I'm setting a goal for myself. That's all I'm doing with this slide. So
all right.
I think so. Now we're actually getting into the material.
Oh wow. Yeah. Almost 2 hours in.
I know. Hey, we had a lot to cover. We may not finish this all today. And so yeah, I think I have Jordan reading here. Yes. So why don't you get us going, Jordan?
Sure. Frazer suggests that the timing of a deity's festival can often reveal something about the god's original character. Festivals held at the new or full moon tend to indicate a lunar association, while those occurring at the winter or summer solstice may point to a solar identity. Celebrations tied to the seasons of sowing or harvest often suggest that the deity embodies vegetation, fertility, or the corn spirit. Such clues are only preliminary and must be confirmed by myth, ritual, or symbolism, but they can provide a useful starting point. In Egypt, however, this method is difficult to apply because the civil calendar consisted of a 365-day year that was not regularly corrected to match the solar year. As a result, the festival dates slowly drifted through the seasons. The country's rainless climate eventually rotating across the entire calendar cycle. While this limits the usefulness of festival timing as evidence, Egyptian life itself remained firmly structured by the natural cycle of the Nile. The country's rainless climate meant that the agriculture depended entirely on the annual inundation. The river began rising in early summer, reached its peak in early autumn, when much of the land lay submerged, and then receded by November, leaving fertile silt in which farmers sowed wheat, barley, and sorghum. Harvest followed in the spring. Thus, even if the official calendar obscured seasonal festival meanings, the stark rhythm of desolation, flood, and renewal that governed the Nile Valley continued to shape Egyptian culture, agriculture, ritual, and religious imagination.
All right. Thank you, Jordan. So, what I want to add on to here, and I've mentioned this throughout, is that JFK is deeply involved in all these different waterworks projects. There's a nice little symmetry. I think it was like 7 weeks before he did the Dallas trip, he was in California. I've talked about this somewhat extensively already. At the inauguration or the opening of the Whiskeytown Dam there. Okay. And then we have the Trinity River Management Project that he was in some way involved with when he was, that's part of the business that he was attending to while he was in Dallas. And below here, I have, the Dealey River, or the Trinity River overflowing, flooding, as you can see here, that in a way mimics the Nile. It's like we have the Nile here in Texas. So what's interesting about this is that, of course, the JFK assassination happens in November. This would have been the time when the Nile was receding and when they would have done the sowing in Egypt. I believe this is going to be covered more with greater specificity when we get into the next section, section 2. I think it actually translates the exact conspiracy against Osiris happens, I believe, in the middle of November. So it's off by maybe 10 days, 11 days or so here with what happens to JFK in Dallas. And this is unusual given that most cultures are planting in the spring. We've talked about this before. It's like, well, why is given what we've looked at elsewhere, why, we looked at the Hilaria Festival. I think it was in when it was with, was it Addis? Yeah, I think it was with Addis. It was happening more in the spring, but if JFK was this Addis figure, why it's happening in the fall. And we're kind of coming up with this idea that the motions of the collective unconscious are going to happen regardless. It's going to take advantage of whatever it has. It's going to associate itself with this harvest festival. Maybe that's not true. Maybe it's more specifically the Osirian festival, because that is when the planting happens in Egypt culture. You could kind of say that Osiris's body is being in some sense planted here. And of course, all the run up, all the tour that he did of all these different dams, I think they went on like an 11 city tour for this thing, could be the demonstration of the Osirian power over water and irrigation and the growing of the crops. Now, what was so interesting during this Whiskeytown visitation that he did, I mentioned this at the very beginning because in some ways it seems that Ossick anticipated this. He's tapped into my mind here. We're having a little bit of a little twin telepathy here. He read this poem to start it off, and this isn't the exact quote. I think he quotes the first passage of the poem. I'm trying to get my screen where I can read it here. Jeez Louise. It is it's called American Names by Stephen Vincent Bennett. And I should have chosen a different color here. It's Rue des Martyrs and Bleeding Heart Yard. I can't even read that. Pisa and Blind Mars. Can you read it, Jordan?
I'll do my best.
I can't see it on my screen.
Rue des Martyrs and Bleeding Heart Yard, Sinless, Pisa, and Blind Man's Oast. It is a magic ghost you guard, but I am sick for a newer ghost. Harrisburg, Spartanburg, Painted Post. Excellent.
Okay, I chose that stanza and sabotaged myself here with a like a hot purple font. What's so interesting about this is that by choosing, I don't think this is necessarily the intention of Bennett when he made this poem, but it does feed into this onomantic analysis that we've been doing, that there is like this ghost or this essence to names. And I think I've read the entire poem. I think the gist of it is that there's something bloated, dead about European names, and he goes through all these other names like Deadwood and places like that he's just like, oh, these are real American names. They communicate the American spirit, that the people have imbued their essence into the towns. They're not these corpulent names. They're these wiry, rebellious, outlaw names. And JFK, sensing that there was something like that going on with the Whiskey Town Dam, took the opportunity, and really he has this speechwriter named Sorensen, who I believe went to Nebraska, which is gonna get back to something else. Sorensen, I believe, was the one who was doing a lot of the speech writing and coming up with the stuff and all the poetic allusions. But it does speak to the idea that there is a certain essence or people's fate imbued into the names of the towns, or perhaps even the names that they have themselves, right? And when we think about that, the Whiskey Town, whiskey is made from like grain alcohol, I believe. I don't know much. I don't drink, so I don't know much about booze. But so, of course, it's kind of like a 2-for-1. You have Osiris as the irrigation god, but also because it's happening at Whiskey Town, there's the crop and the corn aspect of Osiris here too. So the name, the Osirian figure showing up at the Whiskey Town Dam, oh, to me, it's setting off all kinds of like alarm bells that like this is an archetypal eruption.
Yeah, absolutely.
Also, like whiskey and these alcoholic drinks, they're called spirits.
Yeah,
this is
that's right.
So it's like something along those lines as well. So Whiskey Town itself, it's like whenever you hear that term Whiskey Town, it's like alcohol is flowing all over the bars, stools, and everything.
Yeah.
It's like
we're drunk on it. Yeah. Possessed.
That's that makes sense actually.
Yeah.
But like, wouldn't it be more appropriate for it to be Dionysus? I'm like, grain, like Osiris could be, or maybe Adonis or any vegetation god could be the person who brings up the grain, I think. And like maybe after fermentation, it turns into alcohol. I don't know. I'm trying to think of like maybe some other element is there at play.
Well, we have chapters on Dionysus to get through. And I can say with probably 99% certainty that we're going to revisit this. Oh, I just haven't. Yeah. It's been a couple years since I've read the Dionysus chapters. So, and we saw earlier when we looked at the Greek interpretation, the Greek interpretation of the Egyptian gods, Osiris is translates into at least Dionysus and Hades.
Oh,
if you remember that slide where you came in on today. So yeah, of course Dionysus is going to be in play. I haven't. Stay tuned. Stay tuned is all I can say.
Yeah. Also, I like this idea of these physical structures like dam. They literally control lives. So you already talked about them having godlike powers. So yeah, I mean, I'm pretty happy with this slide.
Yeah, it's crazy. I was like,
a dam comes up.
Yeah, it's like I don't like when I started digging into like JFK and dams. It was like, wow, like this wasn't like a one-time thing. This was a big part of what he was doing. So, okay, let's go to the next slide. Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, why don't you go ahead and read that, Jordan?
The religious life of rural Egypt likely began with simple agricultural rites performed by farmers at crucial moments in the farming cycle, such as cutting the irrigation dams, sowing seed, or gathering the harvest. Because these ceremonies followed the visible rhythm of nature and the Nile, they remained relatively stable over time. By contrast, the elaborate festivals celebrated in temples were governed by the Egyptian civil calendar, whose uncorrected 365-day year gradually gradually drifted through the seasons. As a result, the priestly festivals often became disconnected from the natural moments they originally marked. Many of these grand temple celebrations may therefore preserve earlier folk rites in disguised form, expanded with ritual pageantry, but rooted in practical agricultural observances. A striking example appears in the festival of Isis, celebrated when the Nile began to rise. Egyptians believed the swelling river was caused by the tears she shed while mourning Osiris. If Osiris representing the corn or vegetation spirit, this myth corresponded closely to the agricultural year. After harvest, the fields lay bare and lifeless during the dry season, symbolizing the death of the corn god. The rising flood then appeared as the goddess's tears, heralding the renewal of fertility and the eventual rebirth of life in the fields.
Thank you very much. So, I mean, I think this is all very interesting. When Jordan and I were going over this last night, she was like, well, does this happen in our world, like in America? Like, and I was like, it is 11 o'clock at night. And I looked into it a little bit, and it's going to be addressed in the next section. I mean, ultimately, this comes down to master the calendar, which I do not have. But from what I understand, we do have holidays that drift in America, like Easter and things like that, but we have others that don't. And a lot of this is connected to the type of calendar that was in use in Alexandria. Like, our calendar, being the Gregorian calendar, doesn't have as much drift to certain holidays because we have leap years like built into it and stuff like that, right? But we also have I believe it's a hybrid of a solar lunar calendar, and so I'll get into the specifics of it a little bit. But that was something that Jordan and I were dealing with late last night. But what I do want to say here, when thinking about all this Isis stuff, I think it was a Schiller poem that I read years and years ago called "The Veiled Image at Sais." I think it was a Schiller poem. I have to go back and check. And then I thought, I was like, veiled Sais, veiled Isis. Oh, and then I was like, it's Jack. And then I was like, Jackie's veil. She's got the black veil. And then I found this image here. No, it didn't take me too long to see it. This is actually at the Herbert Hoover Historic Site. Isis is a veiled goddess of life. And you put these two things next to each other. I think it's hard to deny that something about Isis is happening here. I mean, although I did when looking for her images of Jackie at the funeral with her veil, apparently Jackie was just wearing veils all the time, which is like interesting in and of itself, that she thought that was like, you know, a good fashion decision. Not that I object to it, but she associated herself with veils all the time. I think she wore them frequently when she went to church and other outings, et cetera, et cetera. This is all very intriguing. I think she would have known about the veil of Isis, given that she had petitioned Jack to save the temple of Dindur. She was already sort of getting familiar with Isis. So we know at that period of history, this was what, 61, 62, when this was going down. And I think it stands to, and we've talked about later on when she's an editor in New York, she's putting out works on Isis and Osiris with Mott. We've looked at Isis and Osiris texts. There's other texts that she put out that clearly have Isis overtones, either in the titles themselves or through the imagery. I think it stands to reason that Jackie, through her education, probably got in contact with Isis ideas and Egyptian ideas. I think she went to Vassar for a period and then may have finished up at George Washington. And I think she had some contact with like French literature and art history. So these ideas would have been circulating. I don't know if she would have picked it up through Baudelaire or something like that. But I think if one really wanted to dig into it and fully spiral on this, I bet you could find some course curriculum from like the 40s and 50s and find that Jackie was studying this stuff back then. So I oftentimes look at the kids too. I look at how John and Caroline act and are dressed at the funeral. It's bizarre because they don't grasp what is happening. Like, they're not sad. I mean, John had turned 3 the day of his father's funeral, and Caroline was 5, or she was about to turn 5. I think she turned 5 on the 27th. So she was still 4, she was practically 5 years old. But everybody else is very somber, and they're like, what's going on? Like, they're just doing kid stuff. But apparently, Jackie kind of, and even JFK had been teaching John how to salute, and he couldn't quite get it right. And Jackie made it a point, when this happens, like when they bring the coffin around, you're going to salute this coffin. She told John, this is what you're going to do. So she scripted this, and she dressed them this way. And I think potentially one could see this. From my understanding of the Egyptian mythology, which is not great, I'm just a little ahead of everybody else, that eventually the Horus figure does get revenge on the forces that conspired against his father, against Set. And this sets a very interesting archetypal mythologum in motion, especially since this stuff seems to be touching on the QAnon things. And a lot of people believe that John or JFK Jr. is behind QAnon. And it makes me wonder if we are looking at Horus's revenge via QAnon. Okay. I don't necessarily subscribe to this idea, but I find it very intriguing from an archetypal perspective. I don't know what's going to happen, but that is, at least in the minds of men, there's this idea that John is going to get his revenge. And that's what this whole thing is about. Okay. Now and so when he salutes the coffin, it's kind of like, don't worry, Dad. Like, I've got you. Like, I'm your heir, and I'll take care of it because I'm Horus. Like, or it's just a kid making a salute. You know, I don't know, but I do know that Jackie and Jack were teaching him how to do this, and he didn't get it right until that day. Okay, the dress. I find the fact that the kids are dressed the same is bizarre to me. And we can get into that. Apparently, like, I'm not even going to get into it, but they've got these red shoes, the white socks, and these blue coats. Okay. The red shoes you could say, oh, look, this is just American colors, red, white, and blue. Maybe that's what we're looking at here. And maybe that's what Jackie was going at, but it also, consciously or unconsciously, it almost is like the father was just like killed, right? It was very bloody. So the red shoes seem in some ways to hearken to that. Like, there's been a sacrifice that we're springing out of it. Not to make white as a symbol of purity. And then the blue, I wonder if that could be associated with the Nile itself, and therefore could continue forward these ideas of death and resurrection of Osiris. So that's what I have for this slide. Commentary?
They are peculiar outfits.
They are.
Yeah.
They don't sit right with me.
I do think that there's something being communicated. Can only speculate what the intended meaning is.
Yeah, I don't know. I know Jackie dressed them, and I know that she taught him the salute, but no one really knows why she chose this, as far as I can tell.
I didn't know that.
But maybe she's sending a message. Blonde. It might be the light. I mean, I would, if you were to ask me what color John's hair is, it's always been dirty. It's always been brown, a shade of brown to me. You know, there are certain images where you look at JFK, like when I watched the speech at the Whiskeytown Dam, and the way the light hits his hair, it looks like he has auburn red hair. So light does weird things. I mean, and because like this was a period where television was in transition, right? Like we went like a black and white society to color society. I don't know, like same deal with cameras. I don't know, without seeing them up close and personal, I don't really know what their hair colors were. Like some of it could be artifacts of the the cameras that are capturing their picture, or optics, just the way that light hits them.
I like the association with ISIS for Jackie Kennedy, and I think she might have been cognizant about it, or even if not, you just subconsciously like what was happening. But like the association with Q, maybe the cultural unconsciousness is acting through it, but like it's difficult for me to buy it at, like around that time. So
yeah,
like,
I'm not
I'm
saying
happy
that's
with the
what's
ISIS
happening.
stuff.
I'm not saying that's what's happening. It's out there. It's people. There's people devoting psychic energy to it. But I mean, if he did, let's just say like the theory is that JFK is behind it all, and he came back and defeated the deep state. It would sort of complete the cycle.
Yeah. But like, weren't there any of his interviews where he talked about his feelings about his father's like demise? I think his interviews might be revelatory in that sense.
I think I mean, I'm not some expert. I think that would be a very worthy project to parse his words. I will say this, since I'm not some Q person, so but I kind of take a lot of what the Q stuff is for granted. So I mean, I'll pass this on.
I'll
I think
read the JFK Jr. book and tell you something about it.
Yeah. I think JFK Jr. was very careful with his words. One of the things that happened, I remember this because I was like a teenager when this happened, is that he launched a magazine called George Magazine. And there was a lot of hubbub and buzz about it. You guys hadn't been born. Well, Jordan had, but she was a few years old.
I know about the George magazine and the controversy about the 2020 thing.
Okay.
The predictions he made.
Right. So in light of all this information, people have gone. I remember at the time he unveiled the George magazine, and people were like, "What the hell is this?" Because he did this big unveiling, like, he pulled back the curtain, and when they pulled it back, it was Cindy Crawford like dressed up like George Washington, and people were like, "Excuse me, what is happening here?" It was very odd. It was a very odd popular culture moment, and people were very critical. People were very critical of JFK my entire life. JFK Jr., I should say. Like, really, this whole idea of not living up to his father, right? Like, he was, there were all these expectations put on him, and he struggled to become a lawyer and pass the bar and all this other stuff. In retrospect, a lot of QAnon people have gone back and believe they have found coded messages about future events in old versions of George magazine, and they cost like $100 to get off eBay and stuff like that now. So take that information what you want. I guess you know about it, right? I think the particular one that has like the vision for 2020, and it has like Bill Gates and stuff like that on it, and some of the things seem to anticipate the events of.
Yeah, I mean, you can find those things in Eyes Wide Shut as well. It's like, what was the production company called? It was called 2020 Productions in Eyes Wide Shut. And
was it really?
Dr. Bill, yeah.
Was it really called 2020?
Yeah.
I have never come across that. I used to be obsessed
with
the
credits.
Keep
You'll
going.
see it. I'll show it to you.
Yeah,
then
keep going.
It's like Dr. Bill at the gates. People said, "Oh, that's Bill Gates" or something like that. So I've been around this thing, like Dr. Bill gets his message through the gates. So, and he's a doctor, and there's this guy. This first of all, he's seen in a montage. He's touching a child's this thing, his lymph glands, and what's the people used to diagnose AIDS like knowing about if these lymph glands have exploded, and the COVID virus also attacked the immune system just as the HIV did. So there's I think he was trying to point out something, because HIV is like such a big part of that Albert movie. So I mean, there's something going on, because why else would he bring it up? Like, is
Well,
he
right.
trying to just say that gay people, or
not
like,
to
I don't
mention that
know.
the movie comes out on the day that JFK Jr. dies, right? So
Yeah.
there's that. There is that. Okay. Shall we proceed?
Yes.
All right. We might actually get this all done. We got about 15 minutes. All right, let's go.
That's right. Okay. Do you want me to read it?
Mm-hmm.
In early Egyptian history, the heliacal rising of Sirius near the summer solstice coincided closely with the beginning of the Nile's annual flood. The Egyptians identified this brilliant dawn star with Isis, calling it Sothis, and treating it as a celestial manifestation of the goddess, much as Astarte, who was associated with the planet Venus in Babylonian tradition. When Sirius appeared in the eastern sky just before sunrise, it seemed to announce the coming renewal of life in Egypt. Soon afterward, the Nile would begin to rise and spread fertile silt across the fields. In mythic language, this heavenly sign represented Isis mourning and calling back her husband Osiris, whose death symbolized the barren season after harvest. The reappearance of the star therefore marked the sacred beginning of the Egyptian year and provided a stable celestial marker that did not drift like the civil calendar. In this way, the rising of Sirius united sky, river, and myth into a single symbolic drama of death, grief, and renewal, reinforcing the idea of Osiris as the vegetation or corn god whose life returned with the flood and the rebirth of the land.
Excellent. I don't have a lot to offer here. One of my favorite things to do, or one of my favorite things was to do, I haven't done it lately, but people got these Nikon P900s and P1000s and would actually take images of the Sirius star. They would film video of it. It's absolutely crazy. And a lot of people dismiss what is captured there. I mean, Ostick can talk a little bit about it. I think he was an amateur astronomer at some point. I've looked at so many different permutations of this. Sometimes it looks like it's got like this morphing field around it. Sometimes it looks hexagonal, but this one seems to be more clear. And I almost see like an eye at the center of it, which is intriguing to me. I don't know if there is the theme song for the Chicago Bulls. Neither of you probably remember this at all, but in the 90s, it was kind of must-see TV to see the beginning of Chicago Bulls games because they would play this incredibly ominous music. You knew if you heard this music, you were about to get like destroyed with the best basketball team that ever existed. And it's an Alan Parsons Project song called Sirius, and it's off. I believe it's either, or maybe it's called Eye in the Sky or whatever, or maybe it's the subtitle, but it's off this album called Eye in the Sky, which that connects to Horus. So it gets all confusing there. The point I just really want to say here is that you should really go look at the stars with some of the technology that we have available to us, because they'll completely change what you understand cosmology to be. Maybe not for Ossick, but it did for me. A lot of people claim that these are artifacts of the telescopes and the cameras that are used, and you really have to believe the things that NASA gives you. I don't. But it's pretty incredible. Ossick, I'm sure you have something to say on this.
No, I'm open to watching. I did not have a good telescope. It was a small telescope. But yeah, stars are difficult to see, and if people are seeing things, like, I think there might be something to it. So it's such a important star astrologically as well, and for different cultures, and even in movies, so many things. They're called the dog star. That's a theme that comes up so many times. Even the Joker thing. Why so serious?
Yeah.
And he says that.
Yeah. Keanu Reeves, Mr. Neo himself, his band is called Dog Star. And and Back to the Future, right? You're gonna see some serious shit, right? And the dog, get this. I don't know if either of you know this. They rescued a dog from 9/11. And the dog's name was Sirius. The dog's name was Sirius.
So there's something to it. I think it has some like religious symbolism for some people. So yeah, I think there's something to it, or it's like a hidden secret, or a, when Celine came in, she talked about that the moon being artificial and it's like a satellite being put around us to monitor us. So I'm not saying that. I'm like there could be a similar idea about the dog star as well. So it's like it might be a satellite or something. Why am I saying this? I do not want to be quoted saying this, but like this is science fiction, guys. This is science fiction.
Disclaimer, this is for entertainment purposes only.
Yeah, this is entertainment purposes only. So I'm just putting it out there. Like with all the imagery that we have seen till now. So I think there's ample of evidence for us to not dismiss it right away.
Yeah.
And I love this song.
Yeah, it's a great song, isn't it? Alan Parsons, they were alchemists. They're a cult. They know what's up. They know what's up. Like you go and you look at their album covers, they know what's up. And that raised, there's the big joke in Austin Powers.
Alan Parsons was a producer for the Beatles.
Yep. And Pink Floyd, wasn't he?
Yeah. So that's
and so that connects those two, and Abbey Road and the mixture here, right? So, okay. We have 10 minutes, so I want to get the last 3 slides in if possible. So Jordan, how about you read 831?
Absolutely. The major moments of the Egyptian agricultural year were marked by rituals and reflected the intimate connection between farming, myth, and the life of the Nile. When the annual flood reached its height and irrigation dams were cut in early August, ceremonies accompanied the release of water into canals and fields. At Cairo's ancient Kalish Canal, a mound of earth called the Bride stood before the dam and was washed away by the rising river, symbolizing the marriage of the Nile to the fertile land. Legends even claimed that a human bride had once been sacrificed to the river to ensure a plentiful inundation, while historical accounts describe priests casting offerings into the water at festivals near Philae. After the flood receded in November, sowing the seed was treated not as a joyful act but as a solemn and mournful rite, since burying the grain in the soil symbolized the death and entombment of the vegetation spirit, identified with Osiris. Similar emotions in Mediterranean rites, such as thesmophoria, were grief accompanied by the disappearance of fertility from the earth. Yet, when the harvest finally came in spring, the farmer's relief was again ritually tempered with sorrow. Cutting the grain was imagined as the violent slaying of the corn god himself. Reapers lamented over the first sheaf and sang mournful chants invoking Isis, acknowledging that the god's sacrificial death in the grain was necessary for the renewal of life and the survival of the community.
Fantastic. We'll be brief with this one since we talked about it already. Here's another image of JFK at the Flaming Gorge Dam on September 27, 1963. And I mentioned the dam tour that he did. I have them all itemized up there, the different ones that he went to. The Ohio, the San Luis, the Flaming Gorge, Whiskey Town, which we've talked about. And I believe that's Greer's Ferry Dam. I believe that was the last one he did before Dallas. So we can go to the next one. And Jordan, you can read that as well.
Across many cultures, agricultural rituals express a strikingly similar belief that the grain itself contains a living spirit whose death and rebirth sustain the community. Among the Cherokee, maize was personified as the Old Woman, a figure derived from a myth in which the slain Silu becomes the first corn. Priests sang invocations to call her presence into the fields, and mournful wailing was performed at the corners of newly worked plots. Comparable ideas appear in ancient Egypt, where reapers lamented while cutting the first sheaf and invoked Isis as they symbolically killed the corn god Osiris in the harvest. Similar rites occur elsewhere, In parts of East Indies, ceremonies guide the soul of the rice from the field to the barn, while among the Nandi people, women harvest the first Eleusine grain with solemn gestures and emphasize mourning rather than celebration. A particularly vivid example comes from the Arabs of Moab, who bury the last sheaf of wheat in a grave and declare that the old man is dead, praying that the wheat will return the following year. Despite their geographical separation, these rites all dramatize the same agricultural insight. The grain must symbolically die in order to live again, and human ritual both mourns that sacrifice and hopes for its renewal in the next season's crop.
Excellently done. So very quickly, I'll because we have about 5 minutes left, and I want to get to this last kind of synchronicity that happened last night and this morning. I'm arguing for a revisitation of the Rice moon landing speech as being potentially, we talked about this before, the rice being a symbol of the alchemical marriage that was about to take place between the solar and lunar essences in the sky. But I think possibly, and we may have touched on this earlier, but the idea that the rice itself could be a container for the vegetative spirit, and that there was some sort of sowing that was going on here. Perhaps this is unnecessary extrapolation, but I find it interesting. Jordan looked up that rice is named after William Marsh's rice or something like that, which is interesting in and of itself when we talk about flooding and vegetation. So that's intriguing. And the owl is a big symbol in Egyptian hieroglyphics as well. Not that I'm some sort of expert, but in general is associated with the underworld and mourning. So in some ways, this could be foreshadowing perhaps the death of JOK, the Osirian figure, an ill omen in some ways, perhaps maybe saying something about space in general as being connected to the underworld. And we'll get into that when we talk about the Osirian rockets sort of reaching out to it and inhabiting it, at least for a period of time. So all of this thinking about universities got me thinking about something else. So I was like, if JFK made this momentous speech at Rice, which is a crop, okay, that can be sown and in some cultures a potential carrier of this vegetative spirit, I just thought to myself, what other universities do I associate with crops, specifically corn? Would anybody? Bueller? Anybody? Can you just think of a school that's associated with corn off the top of your head? Okay, you guys don't watch football. Okay, okay. The Nebraska Cornhuskers. That's the first one that came to my mind.
Yeah, I should have just looked ahead in the slide deck.
I put this together late last night, early this morning. Okay. And I just like, is there any connection between JFK and the Nebraska Cornhuskers? Oh boy, is there. He gave a speech there when he was running for Senate, but that's not the thing I want to focus on. Let's go to the next slide. The nation was in total chaos and disarray and a period of mourning, okay, the day after the assassination. So pretty much all events were canceled, except for the Nebraska Cornhuskers Oklahoma Schooners game. Someone from Nebraska reached out to RFK and said, hey, this is a big game, okay? What do you think? Should we play it or not? And RFK is like, he'd want you to play it. RFK was like, Jack would want you to play this game. And so they did. Do you guys know where the University of Nebraska is? Do you know where it is? You know what city it's in?
No, I do
Nobody
not.
knows?
No, tell us.
It's in Lincoln, Nebraska.
Huh.
Named after Abraham Lincoln. So the only team to play that day, well, maybe there were some smaller ones, but this was the marquee one, okay? The only team to play that day, in light of the Kennedy assassination, was the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Cornhuskers harvest corn. They shuck corn. And they played in Lincoln, Nebraska. And what What are we doing? What are we doing? Like, what is this? I think this speaks to this is not controlled by people, right? I don't know. I did this last minute, so I don't have much more to add to that, except, of course, just in my mind, I was like, what other university is going to be somehow bound up with the Kennedy legacy? And of course, it's going to be Nebraska.
Yeah.
Jordan, I think you're muted. So why don't you have the last word here?
I'm just saying, yeah, right. Like, whoa.
Oh, and they won. And they won.
Interesting.
And perhaps I didn't have time to get into the symbolism of all this. Does anyone know what they played Oklahoma? Does anybody know what a schooner is?
I should. I don't. A Sooner?
Yeah. Or Sooner schooner. They're called Sooner schooners. You should know this stuff.
I've never heard schooner.
A schooner is a covered wagon.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Mm.
Oh, does that ring any bells?
I mean, is it
we look at the wagon, we look at the wagon, JFK being pulled in the wagon
by
the horses.
Yeah.
Covered wagon times. Remember?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Donner Party.
That too, yeah.
Corn huskers and schooners. The only game that day in Lincoln, Nebraska. I think the final score was like 29-20 or something like that.
I mean, I have nothing to say. This is a mic drop moment.
Oh, I forgot to mention. I woke up this morning. I've been up since like 6. But I woke up this morning and the March Madness tournament's going on. And the first thing I saw when I woke up this morning was that Nebraska won a buzzer beater basketball game last night against Vanderbilt. They scored in the last seconds, and then Vanderbilt threw up a Hail Mary. And it went in and out, and Nebraska won. And it was the big headline that went from late last night, early this morning when I was putting this I don't have much to say about this last game being in Nebraska, but Nebraska had some crazy win last night in the March Madness that everybody's talking about.
That's good.
Yeah. Well, they're not, I don't think they're traditionally known to be a basketball program. So it's a big deal.
They might be telling you something.
Yeah, I think so.
Also, the Rice thing that we've been talking about flooding and the dams and like him protecting against floods. Like rice is sown by flooding the fields.
Yeah.
Like rice cannot be sown. So that might be some kind of symbolism as well.
Yep. I'm with you. In the
and
marsh.
Like his name, Marsh Rice. What the hell?
Because you think when you find out you're like, oh, Luke, you can't say that there's a vegetative dimension to Rice University. It's actually named after William Marsh's rice, which is connected to growing rice. Oh boy. All right. Jordan's got to do a thing. Thank you, Ostic. Thank you, everybody who stuck around.
Yeah, this was super fun. Yeah.
I have so much more. I have so much more.
I know.
A gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah. All right. See you guys.
Bye.